Joining me now is Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Dan Wild. Dan, New South Wales faces potential blackouts this week, with temperatures in Sydney tipped to reach 39 degrees. The Australian Energy Market Operator has issued a lack of reserve warning for New South Wales from 3:30 to 7:30 p.m, flagging that the energy deficit could be so severe it may trigger intentional power outages in parts of Sydney. Dan, we've got the Minns government telling people to run their air conditioners at warmer temperatures, to use less power. This is what we were warned about, that if you go down this road, you're going to have blackouts, intentional blackouts.
Unbelievable. For this to be happening in the year 2024 in Australia is a result of policy decisions. All of this is avoidable. You've been talking about this, we've been talking about this ever since Scott Morrison signed Australia up to net zero without any debate, without any discussion, without any analysis. We were warning that we will have blackouts in Australia. When you radically and rapidly decommission baseload power from coal and you put renewables into the system, a weather-dependent energy system, you are going to have blackouts and you are going to have astronomical price rises, which is what we are seeing. This is a monumental failure of leadership over many years on both sides of politics who continue to go down the net zero path. You cannot run a nation on net zero. Humans have spent hundreds and hundreds of years getting out of an energy system that relies on Mother Nature to one that is more reliable, and now we're going backwards. This is a wake-up call to all leaders to urgently stop the path that we're on.
Now, we're in a per capita recession right now. It's something we mention on this program frequently. And the Australian reports today that this is the longest per capita recession we have had in the past 50 years. Economists are warning that this trend will continue. But Dan, we've got Treasurer Jim Chalmers defending the Albanese government's record on economic management. How can he do that given these numbers? And the numbers showing that Australian households are suffering the worst decline in living standards since the 1950s.
Well, it's good to see the Canberra bubble has finally caught up to this. I mean, we've been talking about this for months on end, that we're in a per capita recession, and it's the longest since Whitlam. I mean, the IPA has pointed that out 6 months ago, that this is what's happening. So finally, the mainstream media and the establishment and their favourite economists have finally caught up to the reality, which is that mass migration makes Australians poorer. That's what's happening. The only growth strategy of this government is population growth, not productivity growth. And as you know, Rita, yes, of course, if you bring more people into an economy, the size of the economic pie will get bigger. But the slice of that economic pie that every Australian is getting smaller. And they've got no plan for how to boost our productivity growth, and instead are doubling down on this failed migration strategy. So, look, I think the government's got a real problem here. They don't have any way of growing the economy. This is a redistributionist government, not a growth government. So I think, Jim Chalmers has been found, as we head to MyEFO, which will be coming out next month, has been found to not have any meaningful economic policies up his sleeve.
If you want to know what Australia is going to look like if we had 10 years of the Albanese government, then look at Victoria. The state is broke. State taxes are soaring. Businesses are fleeing. And taxpayers are paying for Labor's massive infrastructure projects, which have blown out by over $40 billion and counting. Just have a look at these three projects. There's plenty of others I could quote, but Melbourne Metro, it's jumped up the blowout there by $4.7 billion. We've got the North East Link. The blowout there is $10.3 billion. And the Westgate Tunnel is $3.9 billion. Dan, you look at how these projects are travelling and you can understand why the state is in the financial peril it's in.
Well, that's exactly right. Victoria has been driven into the ground by a decade of bad policy decisions, and, they can't just blame it on COVID. This happened before COVID, it's been happening after COVID. And the reality is that every single rock that you look under, there's more debt. They keep discovering more debt every single day. I don't know whether anybody in the Victorian government actually knows the true state of Victoria's underlying fiscal position. It is now becoming increasingly apparent that the rest of Australia is going to have to bail out Victoria. Unlike in the Kennett era, when there were similar issues in the early 1990s when Victoria was in a deep recession and Kennett largely restructured the economy, sold off the assets to pay down the debt, well, there's almost no assets left to sell off. So there's real problems. And now this government in Victoria is simply increasing taxes. It's the highest taxing government in the nation, the highest debt government in the nation, the highest spending government in the nation. And this is a warning to everyone else in Australia. Do not go down the path of Victoria. Otherwise, you will see significant economic calamity, businesses leaving, people leaving. It's going to take at least a decade to restructure and fix the mess the Victorians have now been left with.
Staying in Melbourne, let's turn our attention to a pro-Palestinian protest that targeted a synagogue in Caulfield last night, while a conference on Israel's challenges and opportunities in the Middle East was being held inside. The locals did not take too kindly to that. This is an area with a sizable Jewish population, and they came out waving Israeli and Australian flags. Dan, specialist police circle the pro-Palestinian protesters who are holding signs saying things like, nothing is more anti-Semitic than Zionism. This is not what you want to see in the streets of Melbourne or any Australian city.
Well, we're losing our country, Rita, because our migration program has failed. Australia is not a dumping ground for foreign conflict. We are a welcoming nation and a tolerant nation, but that depends on reciprocity and people coming here who share our values. And tolerance is a fundamental Australian value. And plainly, there are a number of those who have migrated here in recent times who do not share those values. And we have to really look at our migration system and say, well, how do these people get into our country? There's far more worthy people who want to be here and want to make a contribution, who should be at the front of the queue. And frankly, if you're going to engage in violence and antagonism towards one group of Australians based on their religion, then you don't have a place in our nation. It's as simple as that. What worries me, Rita, is that many of the people that are engaging in these so-called protests are citizens. They're actually citizens of our country, so they can't really be deported. Yes, you can look at stripping their citizenship, but that's an open question from a legal perspective whether you can do that or not. So, look, we've got a real issue on our hands, and so far our political leaders haven't been willing to do the hard yards and actually talk about the fact that there are many citizens in our country that have these intolerant views, and what are we going to do about it as a community?
Well, further on that, in Sydney, in Liverpool, a tattoo artist there says he's not supportive of terrorists, but he has been offering free tattoos of dead Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah for a month after being inundated with requests. What do you make of this, Dan?
Well, it's exactly what we're talking about. I mean, this kind of behaviour has been condoned and enabled by a lack of political leadership. I mean, from day one of the October 7 attacks, we've had political leadership in Australia that has been lacking, certainly from the federal government. I think Chris Minns in New South Wales has been a bit better on this, but I don't think he's been as outspoken as he potentially could be. So we've got a real social cohesion problem. There's no denying it anymore. And mainstream Australians look at this behaviour and they say, why, what has happened to the country that I live in? What has happened to the country that I moved to, where, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this kind of behaviour was unthinkable. Now it seems to be happening routinely. So, like I say, we've got a long way to go as a community to fix these really difficult issues. A good place to start is to reduce the size of the program, fix the intake, and then we can deal with the issues that we have on the ground.
Now, finally, Dan, I will be speaking to Stephanie Bastian about this shortly, but I wanted to get your take on government officials admitting that there's nothing in Labor's proposed social media bans for under 16s that would stop the eSafety Commissioner from requiring digital ID be used to verify the age of users, and that's all of us. Have a listen.
We've got to pass the law. Once it goes through the Senate, that's it. I don't get to touch it again. Is there anything in the law that says that? That says the E-Safety Commission
There's nothing
cannot
in this
do that?
law that says that.
Okay, thank you.
This is terribly worrying. This seems to be going through at record speed. We know that many in the coalition are favouring these bans. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how these platforms work, how they're used. And it is a backdoor way of introducing digital ID, something that has been rejected by the Australian people, something that's wildly unpopular, and we did not vote for that.
Well, that's right, Rita. I think Senator Canavan and his colleagues, such as Senator Antic, have played a vital role in debate here. As you rightly say, it's record time. The less than 24-hour consultation period is frankly absurd. There's these major issues around digital identification and privacy, many other issues besides. The E-Safety Commissioner used to be the Children's E-Safety Commissioner, you'll remember, and now she's engaging in these global crusades around censorship. So we don't have any confidence in that office. So yes, I fully understand and respect the concerns of parents about how kids interact with social media, but we need to have a proper debate, not a rushed 24-hour consultation process, which is not dignifying this issue at all.
And you're absolutely right about the Safety Commissioner. She's continuously politicised that office. It was supposed to be about the protection of children, but he has morphed into something entirely different. Dan Wild, thanks for your time tonight.